Hi, I'm Ben from Maxi. I'm going to show you how we can set up a jig of variable tags pulling data from a CSV file. We've got a customer who has a tag this size. They would like to have 1 to 3 lines of text all being imported from a CSV file which is coming from their website. So a CSV file is a comma separated variable file. So here's one I've prepared. We have our separate variables all separated by a comma. The file format is .csv. I've called this one variables.csv. We'll use this as our test data. Now it's a bit easier to see in an Excel document, so here it is as a table. You can save these as a .csv from Excel as well, which is just a bit easier to manage. So we have our first property, or our first tag, which would have name 1, the second line would be address 1, and the third line would be the phone number. We want LightBurn to automatically index through this file, updating our tags with these values every time without us having to enter them one by one. So let's jump into LightBurn and set it up. First thing we do is add some text. Now, LightBurn has special placeholders or fields that you enter. So %0 refers to our first column. %1 would be our second column. %2 would be our third column. So what we can do is enter these with a space in between. %1, %2. That will be our placeholders for our 3 lines. Now, if we look up here at the text settings, we can add some space between each of the lines if we need to and do all our normal text adjustment. For instance, if we wanted big gaps, there's a percentage increase, do that. Do your normal adjustments on your height if you wanted really big text. All the normal adjustments that you do to your font. Now this is where we get a little bit special. In here next to these drop-down lists, we have normal text. There's special variables for date, time, and serial numbers. We're going to use merge CSV. And we're going to leave this offset at 0 for now. I'll explain that in a moment. Now over here on the cuts layers, if we look at the variable text tab, we can select a CSV file. So we'll browse for that one that we created, variables.csv. Now it doesn't look like it's done anything, but this CSV file is now being looked at by LightBurn, and it will fill these variables, placeholders, with text. So if we've got our current position in the file is 0, so that would be looking at actually our first line, so 0 is our first line. We're going to start reading the file from that first line, and it will end when it gets to the end, which you can see it's automatically updated to 9, which would be position 10. If we hit our test button here, we can see that it's pulling in our 3 lines of text, name 1, address 1, phone 1. If we update our current counter, you can see it's now looking at the second line, third line, fourth line, and we will do that all the way through the file. And it's advancing by 1. If we set that advance by 3, for instance, when we go to the next one, it's incremented by 3 positions. Let's see our counter there. Now, why would we want to do that? I will show you when we start to set up a jig for multiple tags. Now that we have that first tag set up, we will just copy that whole thing and we'll start making our jig. So if we look at this one now, we've got two tags, but they're both showing the same line number. We don't really want that. We want it to be unique. We want it to show the first one and the second one, and then after it's engraved those two, we want it to jump to the third and fourth one. So what we do here is up under the offset, we're going to set a line offset of 1. So this will offset from our current number by that many lines. So by setting those to 1, this one's still set to 0. Now when we test, we have our first line and our second line. Now we can do that again. And we'll set our offset to 2. Now when we test, we've got our first 3 lines, all coming from our file here. Name 1, name 2, name 3. So we're nearly there, but what will happen is as we advance by 1, you'll see now we've got 2, 3, and 4. 3, 4, and 5. That's not really what we want. We want it to increment by 3. So this is where the advance by number needs to change, and we'll set that to the number of tags we're going to engrave. So we'll set that to 3. So we'll start at 0, 1, 2, and 3. When we press next, it will do 4, 5, and 6. Next, 7, 8, 9. And once we run out, it will leave those other ones blank. It won't do any engraving on those. It will just stop, which is perfect. Now this has all worked very nicely so far, but that's because our text, name 1, address 1, phone 1, all fits neatly on our tag. But what if we have a long address and the address is going to come all the way over here and overhang these circles? We don't want to have to manually adjust every one. So there is a way in LightBurn to automatically scale the text or squeeze the text to fit. So we'd right click on here and we say show properties. Sorry, select the shape. Show properties. You can also access this from the window menu and shape properties. In here, you have an option for a maximum width of the shape. So this is great because when it imports, we can limit how far this can reach. So in this case, we've got 50mm gap between these two holes. So we could set that to limit it to 45mm. Now, I don't have anything that wide in our file, so I'll set that to 15 just so I can demonstrate, and we'll leave that set to squeeze turned on. Now, when we test this, you can now see that the address 1 of the first tag has been squeezed, and that's been limited to 15mm wide. Now, that's great if you don't mind the text looking a little bit different between each line, but if you want to scale them all the same, because this is one shape, all the text is in the one property, we can set this to turn off squeeze, and this will then scale the text instead. So when we test now, it scales all of our name, address, and phone down to the biggest one. So address 1 is our biggest line, and that's been limited to 15mm, and everything else is adjusted as well. If we want to do them all at once, we can do all the shapes at once. Set those to 15, squeeze off, and now all of them will scale to suit. So in this case, for these tags, we'll set that to scale, and we'll limit it to 45mm. So if we get a long address, everything will get scaled down to suit. And if it doesn't need to scale, it won't. Once you have your CSV file tested and working and you're happy that this is all set up, we want to save this LightBurn file as a template. So we'll save this as call it tag jig template, and we will save that. Now, each time we load this file and want to use this, perhaps we want to adjust the position of some of the text or do some resizing. So what we can do is save this. So we've got our template. We'll create a new copy of it. We don't want to override our template. We might call it marking. This is the one we're actually going to mark. And we want to populate this whole thing with, say, these three. So you see here we've got 4, 5, and 6. If we hit the bake button, it removes these variables. So these are no longer variables, but we can now adjust and scale them if we want to customize each one. So we can pull in all the information without typing it one by one, and then adjust them and then mark that. This obviously doesn't work for repeat marking if we're trying to index through and run a whole lot at once. But if we're doing just one fixture at a time and doing some manual adjustment, we can do it this way. If we want to use the index X table to do a large amount at one time, we would probably not use the repeat marking, and we would use the extended table, and we would have a huge jig of as many tags as we can. We would merge them all in, bake them, and then you can go through and manually adjust each one as needed. That's it. I hope this has been helpful and enough of a guide to get you going with CSVs, variables, and LightBurn.